You're listening to Conflict Radio on the Conflict Radio Network. Greetings and welcome to Conflict Radio. Today is February 1st, 2021, and we are already through January of this year. Joining us today is going to be Stephen Myers. He has written a couple books on, I guess, the pyramid pump system, how it's a water pump. And joining us as well is going to be Jared Murphy. Jared, how are you today?
Doing great. How's your week going?
Pretty good. You excited for this interview? It's a pretty interesting theory.
Yeah, it is. And it's important to entertain them all. And this is, it involves water. We know water was used extensively in the past. And this is one of those times where there is a very unique perspective as to how the technology got, well, at least how the pyramid itself got built.
Awesome. And just so everybody knows, on our open line show, we talked about setting up a coupon code for everybody to get onto the back door of Jared Murphy's website. Jared, you want to tell us about that? We got some big news for everybody.
Yeah, we do. So we had talked on the open line show about providing a conflict bumper sticker, a free signed copy of the book. This is in the continental United States. We will work with international people by providing, just send me an email about it. But right now you can put in a conflict as your code. If you are listening exclusively to Conflict Radio, if you sign up for the 6-month membership, you can now get a signed copy. I sign them. I go to the post and I send them to you, copy of the book with a Conflict Radio bumper sticker for now just under $40. It's $40 basically. You're getting $8 off, $7.88. You're getting it's a huge discount, and you got 6 months of private membership with exclusive content on notaliens.com, and it's available now. So when you listen to this, you are the first people hearing this. And I do believe from what you're saying that we have limited bumper stickers.
Yeah, there's about 40 or 50 of them that I have with the old logo on it. So it's going to be a collector's item. Get down to notaliens.com, put in the code, I believe is conflict.
Yep. Just capital C and then just spell conflict for coupons.
There you go. And you'll get a signed book and a bumper sticker. And that's pretty awesome for $40. And you'll get a 6-month membership. So that's pretty cool. And I guess in 6 months we'll come up with another deal so everybody can sign up again. So let's just get right to it. We'll be right back on Conflict Radio with Stephen Myers right after this. Welcome back to Conflict Radio. Jared Murphy is co-hosting with us tonight, and we have a special guest, Stephen Myers. Now, Stephen Myers has written a book called The Lost Technologies of the Great Pyramid. His website, thepump.org, is full of interesting things to look at and ponder in your mind. Stephen, how are you today?
Very good. Thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
You know, it's great to get you on and hear some of your ideas about how the Great Pyramid was built. Do you want to explain this book to us a little bit, and we'll go from there?
Well, it's my first book. It's about the Great Pyramid, and my book is about how the Great Pyramid was assembled, how these stones were brought to the building site and essentially stacked on top of each other to make that great big pyramid structure we see today in ancient Egypt. And that's what it focuses on. A lot of researchers don't focus on the assembly process of the Great Pyramid, but that's my first book. And then my second book is called Great Pyramid Prosperity Machine. And it's about why they went to all that effort.
You think it was a water pump, correct?
I do.
And
I think the Great Pyramid was assembled using water locks and barges, and the stones were moved effortlessly from the Nile all the way up to the building site, and they were able to assemble it rather quickly using barges and water locks.
Yeah, I understand that part of it, but I'm trying to the Great Pyramid water pump. Now, do you think the Great Pyramid was used as a tomb, or that it was a water pump that was pumping water from underneath the sandstone?
Well, I think the Great Pyramid was built by geniuses, and the reason why they built it was to pump water, and that it was never a tomb for the original builders. They never intended it to be a tomb. So,
All right. So how did they pump the water before the pyramid was actually built?
oh, that's easy. The first one of the first things they did to build the Great Pyramid was create the subterranean chamber, which is about 100 feet below the Great Pyramid, and that chamber was part of a what I call the construction pump, and they use that and the associated cuttings to supply water to the water locks. A number of researchers think that the original builders were able to supply water to the construction site, including Christopher Dunn and other researchers. So they used that water to go through that construction pump, and that supplied the water for the water locks as the Great Pyramid was built level by level.
Okay. We just had Christopher Dunn on last week, actually, and we were talking about his theory that it was a power plant of some kind. Jared, what do you think of this theory of how the pyramids were built, and what do you think about the idea that it was built for as being a water pump?
Okay. Yeah. So I know we just got talking before the break, super interested in this subject. And I guess I'd like to start with, as far as it, in your methodology, as far as when you started looking at it, what was, do you mean that the entire Great Pyramid was a water pump, or that it was part of its processing or part of its abilities as a power plant or power structure?
Well, I think the entire Great Pyramid, including the subterranean chamber and associated cuttings, as well as the complex passages and chambers in the structure itself, were all a water pumping system. It's like two water pumps connected in series.
So you mean the entire, so that entire pyramid, that the three pyramids or five, or I guess there at one point some early observations that there were 7 pyramids up there, but maybe there were more, maybe there were, who knows? But of the pyramid system that was there, of the 3 that we see today, do you think that they were all connected as far as being part of that water system?
There's certainly the Great Pyramid doesn't seem to be connected hydraulically to any other pyramid on the Giza Plateau. The focus of my research is how the Great Pyramid was built and why it was built. So it's kind of a narrow focus. My research isn't about whether or not the other pyramids were pumps, but specifically that the Great Pyramid was a water pump.
Oh, okay. So the underground tunnels and systems that are running around the Giza Plateau in general, were they included then? And within that, there's different shafts. I don't even know why they call them shafts. There's different vertical entrance points that run down sometimes hundreds of feet to various tunnel systems that then branch out. And I know a number of those systems are flooded. I understand that not all of them are accessible, and many of them do have salt water. But is that tunneling system, like for instance the Sphinx, is that part of it?
The Sphinx does not pump water. The Giza Plateau and the surrounding area is riddled with a lot of different tunnels and passages, whatever you want to call them, shafts, vertical, horizontal, and all over the place. There's a lot of tunnels, but the focus again of my research is specifically how the Great Pyramid structure pumped water. So there's probably tunnels that may have been associated with the water pump, and probably some that were not.
So does it? Does the tunnel system, or does the pumping? What was the purpose of the water for the pumping? Was it for just supply, in your opinion, or was it supplying other machines, or was it just for cutting?
Well, they built the water pump for a host of purposes, but primarily to provide prosperity. The Great Pyramid transformed the desert into a garden, and it transformed poverty into prosperity, and it transformed toil into leisure. And all of those aspects of prosperity were provided by the Great Pyramid water pump. There's a whole host of purposes you can use the water for, but they all are associated with improving the lives of the people that built the Great Pyramid infrastructure and for their children.
So, do you think that the Great Pyramid was possibly pumping water for like irrigation for just that immediate area? Or are you thinking how far out was it processing water for?
It's hard to say. That's under scholarly debate. The largest structure in North America is the Grand Coulee Dam, and it irrigates an area that's quite a ways away from the dam itself, if you will, about 1.5 million acres. That dam that's in the desert, it's on the Columbia River, the Grand Coulee Dam, but irrigates 1.5 million acres in perpetuity. So that is quite a huge water pumping system. And the Great Pyramid, in a very similar manner, not it operated in a dissimilar manner, but it had a similar purpose, providing irrigation, but also powered heavy machinery and a whole host of things. Probably created compressed air that you can use for a lot of things, and just a whole host of other purposes. I see the Giza Plateau as originally an industrial park or a science center more so than a graveyard.
I agree. It's definitely not. It was adapted later for that purpose, but that's dynastic peoples. I think the original builders had other intents. But do you have a thought process on, given the weathering patterns that are around the Sphinx enclosure, do you think that the Sphinx? Do you think that there's an older antiquity to the Great Pyramid then, or where are you at with the aging on all this?
Well, again, the focus of my research is how the Great Pyramid was assembled and why they did it, not when it was built. But the Sphinx and the pyramids at one time were considered to have been built within a generation or two of each other. And with the breakthrough research of Dr. Robert Schoch, who is a geologist, studying the Sphinx, which is rock, it's in his tool, wheelhouse, if you will. And he, based on his assessment, the Sphinx is much older than traditional Egyptology says it is. So that would lend credence to an older date for the other structures nearby the Sphinx than traditional Egyptologists contend. So, yeah, the Great Pyramid could be much older than 4,500 years.
Well, in the sense of the actual workings of the pumping system, how do you think? Not to get too far into, people should get the book. What are your thoughts on how the water was moving through the structure? What were they using? Was it hydrostatic? Some sort of was it electromagnetic? Was it just like a hydraulic pump system? Literally, was it sucking and pushing water? Or what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the entire structure was a water pump. Water entered the upper end of the descending passage, and a number of other researchers contend that that's certainly a possibility, including Christopher Dunn. I don't know if you asked him about the profound link between water and the Great Pyramid, but anyway, water entered the upper end of the descending passage, went down to the subterranean chamber. That chamber is kind of a unique chamber in that one end of it is very irregularly shaped. They left mounds of stone in that chamber, and many people view that evidence that it's unfinished. Well, it kind of acts like a water break, if you will, because the water enters one end of that chamber and the other end has these mounds that slow the water down. And there's a pit in the floor of the subterranean chamber. And we think that the original builders were able to harness the force of implosion that Victor Schauberger studied, that Austrian researcher in the 1930s. You probably heard of Victor Schauberger. But anyway, that implosion force of water was utilized, and it ultimately pumped water up to the lower end of the Grand Gallery, and it kind of filled that chamber. So that was kind of a very short description of the first water pump. But then in that chamber, they used electrolysis in the Grand Gallery, which other researchers contend electrolysis was part of the functioning of the machine of the Great Pyramid. And it separated hydrogen and oxygen from water in the Grand Gallery. And it is pretty much an airtight chamber. And when you ignite those two gases, you ultimately create a vacuum. There's a lot of YouTube videos where they ignite hydrogen and oxygen, and the result is it creates a vacuum. Well, that helped lift the water up in the Grand Gallery. And when the water rose high enough, it acted like a huge water piston, and that through linkages and timing, that vacuum was broken, which allowed that 300-ton water piston to move back down, and it ultimately compressed air in the Queen's chamber. And then that compressed air forced water up into the King's chamber, and water exited the Great Pyramid structure out the King's chamber vents. And that's a pretty abbreviated explanation of the whole process. You know, there's certainly some check valves and timing mechanisms and other factors, but that's why I wrote my book, and my second book and second documentary describe this. It's very visual, so there's a lot of computer generated animations in my second documentary about how the water pumping process operated.
That's interesting. So you think they were using the water for everything from growing food to possibly, I mean, is this a dynastic application or is this original builders?
Well, I just deal with the original builders, whoever they may be. They might be dynastic too, but that's not the focus of my research. But yeah, the original builders, they wanted to eat every day, and they wanted some leisure instead of toil. So they built this huge infrastructure that helped them. They didn't build the Great Pyramid to tell us they knew pi or anything like that. Just why we build a hydroelectric dam or our power grid and all of those things have the same result as the infrastructure of the Great Pyramid water pump.
Okay, so the other structures on I know you have to focus on 1 billion at a time. It takes a lot of time to do this kind of research. How long did it take you to even get through the engineering? How long did it take you to reverse engineer this?
Well, I've been at this for quite a while, 30 years. So been studying, reading books and that type of thing. That's what researchers do. And compiled some research into some books and documentaries, also some magazine articles. So I've been at this for a while.
Oh, so was there anything that really surprised you about what were you taken aback by anything as you were doing the research? Was there, as you're putting the pieces together, did anything really surprise you or hit you as like, wow, I can't believe this is what it really is?
Yeah, one thing surprised me a lot. When I first started studying the Great Pyramid, I did what everybody did back then. They'd go to the library and fill out a library card and go to the card catalog and get one of them little cards. I don't know if you're old enough to remember those, and check out a book by Egyptologists. So I read those books, but they had a story about a big ramp and stone draggers and workers with strong back muscles, and they had all of that and the whole explanation of the precision stone cutting of casing stones, was accomplished using hand tools. I read all those books, but I found out something that surprised me. And what I found out was there are no demonstrations about that. Egyptology has yet to make a single casing stone like those at the Great Pyramid using the manner they say it was done all day long. Workers could do it all day long, but Egyptology doesn't provide any demonstrations. And the largest stones were 70 tons, but Egyptology has yet to move a single payload of 70 tons, 1 inch. So that's pretty surprising to me that a science doesn't use the scientific method. So that was probably the first really surprising thing that I found out in this whole process of studying this ancient skyscraper we know as the Great Pyramid.
All right, I have a question if I could jump in here for a second, Jared. Now, Stephen, your YouTube channel, if you want to tell everybody what it is, has some fascinating videos on there that show how it's kind of like a lock system that's going around the pyramid, moving the blocks from lock to lock with the, I guess, kind of the same way the Panama Canal works, like a lock system. Is there any proof anywhere that or are there any locks that they had a lock system back in those days?
Well, there's certainly no water locks on the Giza Plateau. So is that what you're asking?
Yeah, like how do we know that they used this lock system?
Well, there's no water locks on the Giza Plateau, but there's also no huge ramp that all the Egyptologists talk about. There's no mummy in the Great Pyramid or golden treasure.
I mean, I hear what you're saying, but where does that theory come from? Did you just think of that, or is there any evidence for that at all? Or
well, yeah, there is evidence. The Giza Plateau is evidence, and that evidence is available to all researchers, you, me, Egyptologists, and everybody else. So that's the evidence. But everyone seems to have a different interpretation of that evidence. So there's certainly some indicators that there's some sort of an association with the Great Pyramid and water. One good example of that is the casing stones that remain at the Giza Plateau. They're cemented together, bonded together with a bonding agent that's known for being stronger than the stone itself. So I wonder why they would need such a strong bonding agent. Maybe they wanted the stones to be watertight. Sir Flanders Petrie, when he was at the Great Pyramid, he's found Nile earth inside the Great Pyramid, which is sediment. Wonder why there's kind of this sediment inside the Great Pyramid. Maybe there's some sort of a water relationship between the Great Pyramid. So there's a lot of evidence. Herodotus in his book described the Great Pyramid as being like an island surrounded by water. So there used to be, up until the 18th century, an enclosure wall around the Great Pyramid, possibly in the 5th century BC, that may have impounded a pond. So there's a lot of different evidence that you can look at and come up with a water interpretation. But yes, on our YouTube channel, we have a video series that describes water locks, which are a 21st century technology, that we use in the 21st century to move our heaviest objects. They use water locks from the Nile River all the way up to the building site and then up the side of the Great Pyramid so it can be assembled level by level. And I hope people go to our YouTube channel, which is, the link is on our website at thepump.org, and watch that video series. I'm glad you like it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. But I'm curious, like where did you get the idea of the water locks from? Like was there something you were looking at and then you were like, oh yeah, and then water locks came to you, or did you just think of water locks and, well, there's no evidence that there isn't any water locks, so, you know what I mean? Like what was the evidence that brought you to the idea that they had water locks going up and around the pyramid?
Well, I read a lot of other books besides what traditional Egyptologists have come up with. And, about the Great Pyramid being a death ray or that it was some sort of a beacon for aliens and all of that. And I find, or that the Great Pyramid confirmed Bible prophecy or had some other purpose. But a few of those books referred to another book called Pharaoh's Pump. And so I had to interlibrary loan that book. And it was quite a book. It talked about, written by Edward Kunkel. And that book talked about water locks being the method to move stones with for the Great Pyramid. And it was his explanation seemed to be consistent with the direct physical evidence, which I think is what you're getting at. So I know that the Erie Canal, when it was built, was 4.5 feet deep, but it carried barges that had a capacity of 70 tons. So in the 1830s, people could move 70 tons with ease. In the 21st century, Egyptology can't move a 70-ton stone at all and never will.
So do you think that they had water pumps to move the water from lock to lock, or you think they just used buckets?
No, there's no buckets in the theory. I think if you word search my books, it doesn't have the word buckets in it. So no buckets. So the like I say, the water pump at the subterranean chamber acted. That water pump supplied the water for the water locks. So there was no water buckets needed.
So the water pump was working before the structure was actually complete?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Jared? Are you there, Jared?
That water pump, it supplied the lifeblood for the process to construct the Great Pyramid, and it allowed those stones to be moved, again, on barges with ease. All researchers acknowledge that barges were used because the barges, the quarries, many of them are across the river and some are 400 miles upstream. So all researchers acknowledge barges were used. Guess what? There's no physical evidence of a barge that was used to build the Great Pyramid. So, but they still think that barges were used. There are some hieroglyphs of some large boats in the valley of the Nile that have two obelisks on them at the same time. So that's kind of interesting. But in terms of direct physical evidence, there's no direct physical evidence for barges.
All right. I'm trying to get Jared back in here. Let's take a break for a sec on Conflict Radio. We'll be right back right after this. And welcome back to Conflict Radio. We've got Jared back. I guess his computer just froze and he had to go through a hard reboot. Welcome back, Jared.
Hi, thanks. Sorry about that, everyone.
All right. Stephen Myers, do you want to, I guess fill Jared in on where we were? I guess we were talking about the lock system, right?
Yeah, the water locks. That's the system of choice for the 21st century. They expanded the Panama Canal, and instead of using a magic wand or worshiping crystals or any other method to move heavy stones that's been proposed, or contemplating their navel or humming, people in the real world really did need to move bigger ships than that could fit in the original Panama Canal. So they expanded it using water locks. And we think that in ancient times, they used water locks to move their heaviest objects that they moved.
All right, Jared. And I turned to you then, and we realized you were gone. I was asking you what you thought of the idea of a water lock system wrapping around the pyramid, sort of to move the blocks up to the top as they were building it.
So So I know earlier, right before the break, we were talking about maybe the central portion of the pyramid being water shafted in a way. Would you describe these channels to lift blocks on the exterior of the building?
Yeah, the Great Pyramid was assembled level by level. So the first stones that were set in place were the casing stones for the first level, if you will. Those stones are cemented together watertight. And water was introduced into that square wall, which made a square pond on the Giza Plateau. And water locks from the Nile River brought the interior stones for that level and moved all the way up and, in fact, into that pond, which was probably 4.5 feet deep, the height of the first level of Great Pyramid casing stones. So those interior stones were moved on barges, and then they were moved from the barge and set down into the pond. And when that pond was filled with stones, the first level of the Great Pyramid was assembled. And the next thing that they did was they put the casing stones for the next level on. They brought those up through these water locks in a production line manner and set those in place on top of the first level of casing stones, added additional water, and that would have been a pond on the second level, if you will, and an additional water lock to that level. So that pond was kept full with the construction pump deep below the Great Pyramid and supplied water to the water locks from that pond all the way down to the catch basin in the Nile. And the process continued systematically 24 hours a day as the Great Pyramid rose to the sky level by level.
Okay. So the blocking system, the way you're describing it, would have required a massive amount of stone in itself, wouldn't it?
None. They used the casing stones as the wall to impound the pond. So they didn't have a separate 450-foot tall wall around the Great Pyramid structure. They used the casing stones themselves. Everything about the construction of the Great Pyramid is the height of efficiency designed and produced by geniuses. So there wasn't any massive amount of stone for any type of additional wall, even though Egyptologists think they used a massive amount of material to make a ramp, which is kind of unworkable. This system didn't require anything like that. But the video series at thepump.org shows this in great detail with a lot of computer-generated animations.
Do you think that they use, if this was the technology they used here, do you feel like there was another area? I mean, did you see any indicators of that throughout Egypt or other locations?
Other area of what?
Of that type of the pump
Yes.
Process.
Yes, the what they call the trial passages, which is right near the Great Pyramid on the Giza Plateau, that are passages that are quite similar to the lower end of the Grand Gallery and some of the other passages. And we think that there may have been some sort of an additional similar technology associated with the trial passages, but the rest of the stone structure is gone now, lost to the sands of time over the eons. But that's another piece of evidence that indicates there was a similar type of technology, possibly.
Well, so you know how heavy. So we have exterior casing stones. We have the interior stones. In your judgment of weight, do you feel like the displacement of those blocks would have not? I mean, I'm just looking at the photograph of the water locks that were incorporated into the casing stones. Do you feel like that the weight itself of the blocks would have displaced the water? It appears to be more like an open pool, right?
Well, yeah, water lock is sort of like a very short passage with doors on both ends. And water locks do actually work and have been demonstrated to work millions of times. So they had a barge that held a stone. So I'm not sure I'm getting what your question is.
Well, based on the weights of, they have estimated some of these stones are well over 100 tons. So the question is, do any of those amounts exceed the capacity of these locks? What would be the capacity for weight?
Excellent question. In the Erie Canal, it was 4.5 feet deep, and the barges carried 70-ton payloads, which is the largest size of stone specific to the Great Pyramid. There are other larger stones that have been moved, in ancient Egypt. But we think that the largest stones, which there were only dozens, if you will, mainly the relieving chambers and the ceiling of the king's chamber, those were the largest stones by far. And we don't think that those stones went up the water locks up the side of the Great Pyramid. It would be inefficient to build water locks that would hold barges that held 70-ton payloads up the side of the Great Pyramid. We think that during an early stage of construction, those stones, those larger stones on barges, were moved through a series of ponds, and that's in our video series. I'm not sure which number it is. I can look it up, but they moved those specific stones to a series of ponds, and onto that pond I was talking about that was impounded by the casing stones. And they just stayed on barges as the Great Pyramid rose up to the height that those were needed. It was sort of like Battleship Row, if you will. And they built the Great Pyramid level by level, and then those stones were available at the height and location they needed to be, and then were moved off of the barge onto to their final location where they are today. So it's still using barges and water, but the vast majority of the Great Pyramid are 2.5-ton stones, and also the casing stones that are up to 16 tons. So that vast majority went again like a production line efficiency up the water locks up the side of the Great Pyramid.
So as they went up, what do you think the time cycle was to move them between locks?
5 minutes. That's a good guess.
That's it. To go from take a block from ground zero up to 300 feet or 350 feet or
per water lock. 5 minutes.
So what would be the estimation then as you get mid pyramid, when you get up a couple hundred feet, what would be so Graham Hancock, for instance, likes to talk about how there's 6 million stones. And if you work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you put them all in place at every 2 minutes, it would take you 26 to 28 years. So I'm wondering what your total time estimate is for it to go together like this.
I would say close to 7 years.
Oh, wow. And so were they doing each row and the finished stones at the same time?
They were building it level by level, and each level they would place the casing stones on first, and then have a pond impounded by those casing stones, and then fill in the interior stones. In the Erie Canal, when it was first built, again 4.5 feet deep with a bunch of water locks, it was able to move the weight of the Great Pyramid higher than the Great Pyramid, because one end of the Erie Canal is much higher than the other end, over 500 feet. But anyway, was able to do that in 2 years. So
the Erie Canal, you don't have to worry about the barge and the water and the surrounding blocks collapsing as it's going up. I mean, the way the pyramid's angled, the locks would have to, as the pyramid was getting close to the top, the locks would have to actually be sitting over top an angled structure. And I'm just trying to figure out how would they build that strong enough to where the weight of the water and the weight of the blocks and everything isn't collapsing as it's going up.
Yeah, everything about the Great Pyramid is very strong. Each casing stone was built securely on the top. Excuse me, let me start over. Each waterlock was built securely on the top of the casing stones below it. They were kind of cantilevered in, and they were built into the wall of casing stones, if you will. So the next one, the next casing stone, the next waterlock was kind of built in. So it wasn't a straight line of casing stone of waterlocks, but they were kind of recessed in each level. So each waterlock had a flat base and set securely on the base on the top of the casing stone below it. So, but our video series describes that in great detail, as do my books.
Yeah. Do you think that there are any indicators that, or do they just, I mean, from a polishing technique, how did they polish the exterior?
Well, I wouldn't say polish, because polish is a process, but the result is smooth. The casing stones are quite smooth, and that is certainly well known by the work of both Flanders Petrie 100 years ago and also by Christopher Dunn. So it's extremely large scale precision on, that is beyond the scope of making the casing stones with hand tools. But my understanding is actually superior to the entire science of Egyptology in regards to the precision stone cutting, similar to what is seen on Great Pyramid casing stones, in that I know that it can't be done using hand tools. All books written by Egyptologists have that error in them. So that's interesting. I know on some books that you look up on Amazon, people gripe about like a typo or whatever because it's an error. But those same people don't go to books, authors that are Egyptologists and say, hey, your book's got a great big error in it. It says that the precision stone cutting was accomplished using hand tools. So it's just interesting.
Yeah. A lot of the exterior blocks, like the finished stones, they're 3-dimensional. They're set in sideways. So you have they're not just stacked, they're actually plugged in almost like a Lego. I'm wondering how it is when you were considering the setup, how would they do the polygonal shaping, because they weren't just four-sided, or they weren't just a cube or a rectangle. They were multi-sided when they got to that finishing layer, and they fit perfectly together. So as they're bringing up these blocks before they do a final set with water, how are they shaping the stones?
I think they're using the stone cutting method, whatever it may be, the precision stone cutting method, and use an angle of 52 degrees and cut the stone. And that's how they cut the face, which is at an angle, if you will. Even 90 degrees is an angle, but they, like if you have a table saw, you turn the blade, to the correct degree and cut the material, and they cut the material with ease. In the real world, extreme precision isn't accomplished like by working really hard. Extreme precision is accomplished using tools. Like in a machine shop, you have tools like power tools, like a lathe, milling machine, and then you have very few workers. So they probably had some method to cut the stone, but it wasn't like backbreaking work, if you will.
So, all right, that's interesting. Have you been able to look for, or have you had any friends that, or have you gone, or have you looked at anything in particular at the site itself that maybe pointed towards the locking systems?
Yes,
Or do
I've been to the Great Pyramid, certainly been to Egypt, the Giza Plateau. In fact, I was going to lead a tour in later this month, but because of coronavirus and travel restrictions, that tour had to be canceled. I was co-leading it with another researcher, Barbara Jean Lindsay, and it would have been like a 13-day tour, but it hasn't been rescheduled yet because of coronavirus concerns. The itinerary is still on our website at thepump.org, so people can get an idea of what didn't happen, if you will. But I was there and I saw great big casing stones that are beyond the scope of human back muscle to move and set in place with extreme precision and no handling scars. So I saw that and saw a whole host of other things that indicated that certainly all Egyptologists are wrong about the big ramp theory. And that's one reason why they don't provide demonstrations.
So from a water standpoint, you've heard that there's a lot of theories. Well, there was a statement made by dynastic Egyptians that the Nile used to run east-west. Did you find any indicators or evidences of that?
Yes, there's ideas certainly in a number of books about the path of the Nile River has changed over the eons, and that's certainly a possibility.
Well, I mean, if they were going to use water as this methodology, and they're placing, again, at the rate of, if each lock takes 5 minutes and you're up to 400 feet in a rectangular pattern, it's not like the Panama Canal goes, one direction, right? So do you think that there was if each lock takes 5 minutes, then the placement of these stones and the shaping of them specifically in each of their positions is so precisioned, you don't think it would have taken longer than even what was described if you were placing them every 2 minutes?
I don't. If you have, let's say, 15 water locks that takes 5 minutes each, takes each stone, an hour and 15 minutes. But you have a stone in each water lock. So if you have 15 water locks, every 5 minutes, one pops out a barge with a stone on it, pops out the top water lock. So every 5 minutes, like I said.
So to get the length, so the theory goes that the length of the canal is relatively identical to the height of the pyramid. And how long does it take to travel from the lowest point to the highest point in the canal?
Oh, that would be 5 minutes per water lock. But again, each water lock had a barge in it. So when you, the water lock, the level, let's say the top water lock, the level is low. You move a barge in, you raise it up. That takes 5 minutes to raise it up and then get the water lock, get the barge out. Then the water goes back down, and right in the water lock next to it is another barge with a stone on it. Casing stones weigh, let's say, 16 tons. So if you were moving one of those, you'd have one stone on the barge. But if you were moving interior stones, you might put 5 on. 5 times 1.5 is 15. So you can move 5 of those in 5 minutes.
So when they reach the level and they're floating around in the layer that they're on, they get them to, I guess, how do they finish off a level and then get to I guess it's in the videos, but I guess I'm fascinated by the theory. I'm very fascinated by this idea that I've definitely worked in a number of, I do historical remodeling, but I also worked a short time in a factory that was very complex, very large, and very automated, but also...
In a car factory, it takes about a day and a half to make a car. but at the where they come out at one every 5 minutes, because all of these processes are going on sequentially, but at the same time. It's factory production line efficiency is how the original builders built the Great Pyramid. So let's say you got a barge with a casing stone on top of it. That's 16 tons. You're not going to lift it by hand or using your back muscles. You can't move it off the barge. But let's say in that pond, there's a couple of supports that are just a little bit wider apart than the barge. And because water locks are long and narrow, the barge is narrow, and the casing stone overhangs the barge just a little bit. So people waiting in the pond will move that barge between those two supports, those two stone supports, and then they will let some water into that barge, and it will lower the barge and lower the stone on those two supports. And the barge halfway submerged, you can still move it over to the side of the pond, and then you just siphon water out, and there you go. It is faster to unload a barge than it is to describe how it's done. That's just part of it.
Yeah. So how were they able? And I guess I didn't watch all of your videos. I did watch some. Were there any there that showed how they were able to turn these barges 90 degrees on the corners to go up again?
No. We think that the water locks were just zigzagged up the north face. So they didn't have to go around the corner, if you will. A criteria that you can use for the construction of the Great Pyramid is, if it's not a powerful system, that ain't the system that they used.
So
if it's not a very fast system, it's not efficient system they used. And if it's not efficient, then it's a system they didn't use. So no, they didn't have to go around the corner. They just zigzagged like trains used to go up switchbacks, if you will. It would go along and then back up, if you will, up the side of the mountain, and they could gain elevation. And we think in a very similar manner, the water locks on the north face of the Great Pyramid acted in the same manner.
Like switchbacks on a mountain pass.
Kind of, yes. Very much so.
So is there any evidence on the pyramids today that show which side of the pyramid this waterlock system was zigzagging up and down?
We assume it was the north face.
And why is that?
It's just by convention. Certainly there's scholarly debate, but that's the face I would pick. So
you're saying that the water that they actually filled these locks with was coming from the pyramid pump itself?
We do. It was pumped up through the subterranean chamber and up into that pond.
So if that's the case,
that allowed the whole process to be effortless.
If that's the case, what would be the point of even going through all this trouble to finish the pyramid if the pump was already working?
Well, that's a great question. That's a super good question. But the best way to answer that is with a technical explanation. And instead of, hieroglyphs or what language the original builders spoke or what their gods were, or if the vents point to stars or anything like that, let's examine that on a technical level. The subterranean chamber acted as a water pump, and yet they still built a whole structure to be a water pump. In other words, two water pumps in series. And what that did was that it supercharged the whole system and made it much more powerful. Have you ever been driving along and look out and seen a railroad train go by and it has more than one engine?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have. Yeah. Well, why didn't they just make one engine really big and not have to use more than one engine?
So do you think the hieroglyphics that are inside the pyramid were carved before or after the stones were placed then, if they were underwater?
Yeah, it doesn't. There are no formal hieroglyphs associated with the Great Pyramid. There are some quarry marks, but getting back to why they need two water pumps in series, railroad trains, they have several engines in series, and in fact, a V8 engine is actually 8 one-cylinder engines that are connected in series with some common, like the manifold. It supplies all cylinders, from the carburetor, if you will. So engines are also connected in series. So you could ask the same question. Well, why did they build cars with more than one engine when they could use an engine with only one cylinder? Well, there's a whole technical set of reasons for that purpose.
So why isn't it working today?
It's broken. The Great Pyramid broke. Specifically, I think that the coffer in the king's chamber, which acted like a float and was part of a mechanism to keep that chamber from becoming totally waterlogged, if you will. It was normally half full of water, bottom half, upper half they used to compress the air, if you will. It was compressed air. Well, that float mechanism that controlled that broke. And ultimately, the king's chamber became waterlogged, and the hydraulic pressure of adding additional water hydraulicked that chamber. Many researchers acknowledge that there was some sort of an expansive force in the king's chamber. Some say it was an explosion, for various reasons. And that's the only structural damage that is associated with the Great Pyramid that wasn't caused by the hands of man through the eons. So the Great Pyramid broke, and that's when the ceiling stones of the king's chamber broke, and the king's chamber itself kind of suffered an expansive force that rendered the Great Pyramid water pump unworkable.
Well, what about the like the first water pump that was working when they were doing the original casings? That wouldn't have anything to do with the
ultimately, it was an integrated system, if you will. So it wouldn't work. If you had one piston in your engine on your pickup seize up, it had no effect on the rest of the other engines, but the other cylinders, but it renders the whole system unworkable.
Yeah, but this goes back to what you were saying about the two trains. It's that's just one piston on one of the trains. Why isn't the other train working?
I gave the analogy of a engine in a vehicle. If one of the pistons froze up, then it would cause the whole engine to be unworkable. And if one of the engines, although they're not an integrated thing, they can be separated. They're made to be separated, railroad engines, if you will, but not the Great Pyramid water pump. It was all integrated and all worked together.
All right, Jared, do you have any more questions?
Oh, no. I do. I guess I have one about whether or not you saw any other ancillary systems outside of the Giza Plateau in reference to if they had the water system being used for irrigation of any kind, or did you see any, with this kind of level of technology, did you see any of it across dynastic Egypt in reference to canals?
Again, dynastic Egypt refers to when, and that's not the focus of my research. And so it's hard to say. But I know that the largest water pump in the world is in the Valley of the Nile, and it's pumping water right now. So that's kind of a fascinating thing. So in modern times, the Valley of the Nile, modern people needed a very big water pumping system. And in ancient times, the people in the Valley of the Nile needed a very large water pumping system.
Yeah, it's super fascinating. Yeah, I was just curious. I'm assuming, are you working on another book then, or where are you at now?
Well, we're doing a lot of things. That water pump that it's pumping water right now that I referred to was the Mubarak pumping station, and they are built. That's operational now, and it is used to pump water, powered by the largest structure in the Valley of the Nile, which is the High Aswan Dam. So they built the High Aswan Dam, stopped the yearly inundation, and ultimately built this large water pumping system. So yeah, water pumps have always been a major aspect of the Valley of the Nile. But yeah, we're adding some YouTube videos for additional content for people. I've written some magazine articles, the books, also 2 documentaries with a lot of computer generated animations. And we do have our nonprofit foundation at thepump.org. People can go there and find out what we're about, our mission statement, activities, that type of thing. And so that's where we're at. But yeah, we're working on have a lot of projects. We also have a facility here at our research center that we're making components and sub-assemblies of this unique water pumping system. We want to redevelop this water pumping system that is efficient and also environmentally sound, if you will, non-polluting, and redevelop this ancient high technology for our modern but very troubled world.
Super. It would be fun to see it working. It would be really neat.
It will be. That's our goal. Twice as many people every day die from malnutrition and can't irrigate their farmland than on 9/11. So we're kind of a humanitarian organization in that regards, trying to develop this alternative system to pump water cheaply. And of course, if you have pumped water, you can use that to either power machinery or generate electricity. So there's a whole host of uses in modern times as well as ancient times for this unique water pumping technology.
Are you talking about building more pyramids?
In a way, I am talking about that. We're going to scale it down quite a bit and use polypropylene containers, PVC pipe, specialized valves, and some other fabrication. So we're doing that. The footprint would certainly be a lot smaller. You don't need a big stone pyramid in everybody's backyard or anything. We're trying to develop plans where this technology can be built using locally sourced materials like PVC pipe, 55-gallon drums, so it can be redeveloped in the third world, which is where it was originally developed in Africa. So we're doing all of that. We are seeking funding for a 3D printer and also for a plasma cutter. So if anyone is interested in getting involved in that funding effort, they sure can by contacting us through our nonprofit foundation's website at thepump.org.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's cool.
So, just one more quick question from me: Is there any evidence that suggests any of these other pyramids around the world acted in such a manner?
Well, again, that's a great question. People need to dedicate their lives to conducting research. I'm a researcher, and the answer to every question is more research. But there's a lot of pyramids out there, certainly with different designs. They use different materials. Some in Central and South America are made of rubble, if you will, loose fill, and they have different designs, different interior passages. Some have ceremonial platforms on top. But if you don't have I-beams made of steel and you want to build a tall building, you have to have it big at the bottom and small at the top, masonry, if you will. So that's I'm not saying that there's any relationship between Like the Great Pyramid water pump and other pumps around the world, that it's a worldwide system or anything like that. But certainly, if someone wants to research that, they sure can.
Do you think that all of the pyramids were built with the lock system, or just this one?
I don't. There's a big pyramid in Las Vegas that wasn't built that way. And there's a pyramid in the Louvre, believe it or not, in Paris. And it wasn't built that way. But I know you mean ancient pyramids. No, I don't. I don't think, I asked a builder who was building a house next door to me. I said, is every structure built the same way like this one? He said, of course not. Different structures have different purposes, different designs. So there's no one magic bullet, if you will, that answers every question about every pyramid around the world. So pyramids, in fact, seem to be more different than they are similar. They have a sort of a basic similar shape, but that's about it.
Okay. All right. Stephen Myers, do you want to tell everyone where they can find you?
The best place to contact me is through email from our foundation's website at thepump.org. And they can ask questions or find out our upcoming activities. They can get involved if they want to, and that type of thing. So that's the best place they can contact me. And the links for my books and documentaries are at thepump.org as well.
All right. And the name of your YouTube channel where everybody can go and watch those videos. I found those to be pretty interesting to see.
That is youtube.com/Great Pyramid Pump Videos. Right. So they can look that up. And again, there's a lot of material and information about that, about how the Great Pyramid was assembled. We also talk a lot about the lack of demonstrations provided by Egyptology and the implication of that fact. We talk about these correlations that people come up with, like Great Pyramid, Bible correlations, or star correlations. So we have videos that address all of those issues and more.
All right, awesome. And just so everybody knows, it's thepump.org. The link will be in the description below. We'll be right back on Conflict Radio right after this. Welcome back to Conflict Radio. That was Stephen Myers. Be sure to check out his website, and it'll be in the description box below. Jared, what'd you think?
Yeah, super fascinating. There is so many ways that when you don't really think about the canal systems that we've already built being just 4 feet deep, and the amount of weight just in the ships themselves. I mean, we concentrated on what was on those barges, but the barges themselves are significantly heavy, and they are going up from one end to the other. They're traversing a distance that's taller than the pyramid itself. So the height makes sense. I don't know about the placement, but the technology is realistic, and for an ancient high-tech human race, it's not like they went. The reason I asked the questions I did about just the general lock and dam system, I don't think the dynastic Egyptians are responsible for this, and they may have readapted some of the channels. I know Flinders Petrie, and I'm reading some of his measurements and his explorations of Giza. He's describing right now, at least where I'm at, I'm about page 160-ish, and the book talks about some of the complex, it appears to be kind of, I wouldn't call them canals, but there's definitely some channel systems cut around the Great Pyramid and on that plateau in that area where could they have been hydrostatic water locks? I wouldn't describe them entirely as that, but at the same time, you couldn't really rule it out. But more importantly, that kind of water system, thinking out of the box, I think is really important. He describes a system that could be used in Greater Egypt, maybe in a pre-dynastic, but maybe post-high technology society. Maybe it was a remnant system that could be have been incorporated after a disaster. maybe it was a system because it was simply easier to maintain. You got to think, not that locks and dams aren't complicated, they are very complex, but they're also something that we here in America have an unexplained. You can get a LiDAR/satellite image in Florida and in Arizona. We have areas that look like there were canal systems that are now deserts and or not, very much swamplands, and they predate, or they're definitely not the Seminole Indians in Florida. They're definitely not other native peoples that we know of. And it just says, hey, there's this larger dam and lock system around the world. There's a very extensive one in Angkor, not specifically Angkor Wat, but in that area. There's an extensive channel system that is incredibly complex. So if we just look around the world at those channel systems, I think it's an idea that could be applied in a lot of different ways in different other pre-dynastic peoples, what appears to be that single society that was around the planet. It is a possibility, even if we have different ideas on how this, and I'm not saying me or you or anyone, just that for anyone listening, if they have different ideas about how the pyramid was built or when, which is, I think, relevant to the technology itself, it doesn't matter in the sense that I think he clarified the vision pretty well about what a lock and dam system would look like over a period of space.
Yeah, I found it pretty interesting, though. I guess my own personal opinion, I think I'd have to see a little bit more evidence. I just don't think the pyramids are built this way, but
yeah. Well, to your
to your point,
opinion, or I know that he brought it up also that there is no example of any archaeologist recreating the exact methods to create a single block, let alone fit it on all sides three-dimensionally into the pyramid locking system that's there, because they did lock. The casing stones did lock. That's why there's stones still on the structure in various locations. When we look at the three pyramids on the plateau, there's one that appears to have all the casing stones towards the top. And what's only relevant about what I'm talking about is that they are locked in place. They're locked dimensionally. They're locked like a Lego, but on the back side. And so they're not sat on top of each other. They're locked into the it's like a tree, locking branches into a fake tree or something, and not just on a post, but like plugging in the branches. So the description is describing a technology that had place, it's just a tremendous amount of weight over the course of, I like Graham Hancock's description that it would take, even if you placed a block every 2 minutes for 24 hours a day, it would be somewhere between 24, 26, and 28 years to build this structure. And that's significant. So they had to be either building it faster than 2 minutes a block, or it took them longer. And even if they were, and then there's the hydrostatic part, so there's a lot of questions, but they're ones that I think are important to challenge us to not disavow the technology that he came up with. I think that we need to maybe look for remnants of that kind of technology. It's not exciting. I always talk about engineered soil. It's probably not as interesting for people to go, well, who cares about a lock and channel and dam system? But where there's already sites you can go to that there appears to be very straight, very well cut, megalithic channel systems and artificial barriers and coastal structures. And, we've talked about some that are even in the Mediterranean that appear to be, concretes, geopolymers. So there's a lot of room to accept that a lock and dam system could be in place, but raising it up to build that structure, you have to have a date on it, because the amount of water, and not that there wasn't water nearby, but I do think that you have to throw down a date. You have to consider what was the a time frame. I guess you do have to consider a time frame, and there is a number of blocks on the Great Pyramid itself that have weathered, whether external casing or internal blocks. There is some significant weathering, and I know Flinders Petrie talks about it. I know that, of course, Robert Schock and everyone talks about the Sphinx being totally worn to 36, 40,000, 250,000. There's so many different estimates for its antiquity, and it appears that there's weathering being exposed in the Great Pyramid that definitely puts it pre-dynastic. So
Yeah. Well, he definitely did have an interesting theory, and it was great for him to come on and share it with us. Regardless,
well, the
what,
videos, like
yeah.
you said,
And
that
the
he
videos
has
are
really cool
fascinating, yeah.
videos.
So
Yeah.
all of the links to his stuff will be in the description below. I'll even add a link to his YouTube channel down there. And Jared, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you?
Yeah, it will be notaliens.com. You can find my book on Amazon real fast and cheaper, but for a few dollars more, you can get a signed copy. And don't forget, all you conflict listeners, you now can get a conflict bumper sticker and the book signed, still sending it to you for $40 for a 6-month membership to the members area, where you will hear more of Michael and I for sure, telling you what we really think and not getting banned for it.
Yeah, and if we get a bunch of people to sign up, we'll definitely do some shows over there and figure out a way to get you guys some live shows so that we can talk to you without the AI bothering us too much about what we say. And that's a great deal, $40 for 6 months, and you get a signed book and a conflict bumper sticker. That's pretty awesome, and that's only going to be for the first 50 or so people that sign up. After that, the bumper stickers, I guess I can get them. I can get them redone if we get more than 50 signed up, but it'll be the new logo. So only the first 50 will get the old logo. So I guess that's going to do it for us. Remember, you can always find us online. Just go to www.conflictradio.net. We're available on all of your normal podcast catchers, including Spreaker and Apple iTunes. And well, I guess that's going to wrap it up for us. Jared, anything else to say?
No, I look forward to being on with you next week. We got some really cool people, Daniel and Teresa Duke, for great grandkids of Jesse James, and I think we're talking to David Brody, 14-time book
Thursday.
author.
Yeah, that ought to be a really good time. Well, that's it for us, everybody. Batten down the hatches and be safe.